I'm Primal Piggy. Thank you for joining me for another BDSM United podcast. Today we start a new series called the ABCs of BDSM, where we want to take you through some introductory stuff again. Uh, you cannot get to advanced algebra and calculus and physics and string theory and all of the just advanced topics of this world unless you know a bit about basic math. The same goes with BDSM and kinky play. Yeah, it's not a good idea to jump into the most advanced things that are out there without having a good solid foundation in the ABCs, in the one, two, threes, in what BDSM is, what it's about, uh, in all of the basic things, scene protocols, and the like. It's a good idea to know some things about ethics and character and all of those types of things as well. All of the foundational things are really important because we build upon the foundation to create our BDSM identities and to create our BDSM scenes and to create BDSM relationships and to do kinks and to learn techniques. It's all built upon a foundation. So we really want to start afresh with a foundation. And maybe you've been involved in BDSM for a long time, and maybe there are gaps in your foundation. It can cause problems down the road, especially in relationships, and sometimes in how you interact with your local community or interact with others around you. If there's gaps in your understanding of basic things, it can cause problems down the road. Or maybe you're new to BDSM. Maybe you're new to our podcast. Thank you for listening. If you're new to BDSM, you'll definitely uh, like that this types of educational things are being brought to you. This podcast has hundreds of episodes, and some things, like our slave training series, are more advanced, but we like to also include really foundational things as well. It's really important. So, what is BDSM? Uh, the letters BDSM represent a open-ended range of practices, of expressions, many forms of things like restraint, sensory stimulation, role playing, interpersonal dynamics, relationships. It includes a lot of things, and these activities are usually erotic or kinky at some level, but might not involve actual sex. BDSM can involve sex and it can involve kink, but neither of those things are necessary. You can do a lot of aspects of BDSM without sex and without kink. There are ways to uh, be non kinky and still do some aspects of power exchange relationships. BDSM derives from a combination of the letters B and D. Those two go together for bondage and discipline. And S and M, uh, also sometimes known as sadomasochism, for sadism and masochism separately, which typically involves pain or humiliation. And the bondage and discipline stands for all aspects of restraint, control, power exchange, all of the like. It was later noticed that a little, down the road, that the D and the S looked a lot like a term that we already have in BSM, which we'll discuss later. Uh, and people began around the time of the late 90s, early mid late 90s, uh, that the middle could stand for dominance and submission. But since both B and D and S and M usually involve aspects of power exchange already, especially the B and the D part. Really adding the D and the S for to stand something special or unique is kind of unnecessary. Uh, you can do it. It's okay if it's there. It's just an unnecessary addition that came later down the road. For some, BDSM is about authority based relationships, the giving and the receiving of service, or that may or may not be sexual. There are aspects of power exchange relationships. I'll give you an example. There's a 1950s head of household type of scenario, or there's another scenario called a domestic discipline type relationship where neither of these are necessarily kinky or kink involved. And they may or they may not involve sex. They may be between partners who don't have intercourse, and so and a lot of times there's very little, if any, kink involved in those types of power exchange relationships. And while they fall within the scope of BDSM, they are not inherently kinky and may not be sexual. And as well, there are lots of demisexual and asexual people and people of all sexualities that are involved in BDSM. That, and there are people of all age groups, all age groups including only adults, people from 18 to 100 or more could be involved in BDSM, and not people at every stage of adulthood are not at every stage of adulthood are inherently sexually active. Uh, there may be people involved in BDSM that are virgins, people who are too young and have not had sex yet. People, they're, 18, 19, 20, 21, or however old, and they have not had sex yet, and or perhaps they're saving themselves for marriage, but they can be involved in types of impact play and other types of BDSM and S&M play that don't include sex. And then in the later years of as people age, sometimes people experience things like ED, erectile dysfunction, or shifts in hormone levels, menopause. There's different things to where they may not have an interest or a desire or the capability to have sex, and so they can still be involved in aspects of BDSM. And then people, just of regardless of age, there are people with disabilities, people with handicaps, people with mental health issues, people that have experienced various levels of trauma, and there and are survivors of trauma, and they may not be having sex or be interested in having sex. And so there are lots of reasons why, a multitude of reasons why they may be involved in BSM, but it may not be sexual. And so it's really important to know that, especially coming into BDSM, because a lot of people automatically think that it's just like some free love, some kind of sex thing. And a lot of vanilla people come into BDSM looking for rough sex. And BDSM can be that, but it's a lot more. And it may not be that for everyone. So when you come in with ideas, you sometimes need to empty yourself of some of the preconceived ideas or notions that you have in order to be successful as you navigate BDSM, because you may be thinking everyone's here for the same things that you're here for, and that may not be the case. For some, BDSM is about those authority based relationships, the giving or receiving. For others, BDSM is about losing themselves temporarily in intense sensations or unusual psychological or maybe even spiritual states resulting from things like bondage or pain play. Of course, there are also the edgy few who are drawn to the pain centered S&M practices simply because they're taboo within mainstream culture. Moths to flames, as Dr. Robert Rubel says. The historical origins of S&M and B&D as erotic practices are obscure. Researchers have found examples of S&M as far back as the 6th century BCE uh, at, in what is now a part of Italy. An erotic depiction of two men striking a woman with a cane was found inside a burial chamber. Also, uh, if you have a look at India's famed Kama Sutra, written between 400 BCE and 200 CE, you'll find explicit descriptions of different ways to strike your partner during sex. It tells where to hit. It even describes some of the joyful cries of pain the strikes evoke. It also says that impact play, biting, and pinching during sex require the woman's consent, since not everyone enjoys pain of this sort, making it one of the first written guides to S&M techniques and safety. So S&M by itself has a very long, rich history that transcends a lot of different cultures and time periods. You'll find S&M practices probably as early as the caveman days. Any time, uh, anytime, anywhere, people have liked to utilize pain in positive ways. And the sensations of giving and receiving pain. It's just ingrained in us as human beings. We are just inherently, many of us, sadistic or masochistic, just in our DNA. It just seems to be there, and it seems to be there all throughout history. And while S&M has that long history, the B and the D, or the BDSM, as we put all together, has a rather more recent history. It started post World War II, around the 1940s into the 1950s. And that's when we see people, it was started when uh, predominantly homosexual men came back from the war, combining that military hierarchy, the military mindset, with their erotic and kinky S&M play. That's where we get the discipline and the bondage of mental and physical type bondage, culminating with the S&M erotic kinky play coming together and making BDSM. So it has been around for what, like 70 or 80 years tops. And so BDSM, while it started with exclusively homosexual men, it didn't take very many years into the 60s and 70s when homosexual women began to become a more recognizable part of BDSM. And then, not long after that, into the 70s and 80s, straight people began to incorporate BSM into their relationships and into how they do relationships. And then, with it really exploded with the invention of the internet, and the internet really uh, made what was more something more exclusive and more localized, and really spread it out and made it really accessible to a lot more people. But when things are more accessible to more people, it comes with both benefits, obvious benefits of inclusion and diversity, but it also comes with consequences too. because now we have uh, people that are involved in our lifestyle, in our culture, that may not understand our lifestyle and culture. People are coming in and may not understand aspects of safety or protocol, or may not know what's involved. So it's important to do educational resources like this podcast, and we'll get into more of that along the way. I'm Primo Piggy. Thank you for joining me for this BDSM United podcast. You can find all of our resources at www.bdsmunited.com. Thank you for joining me today, and I will talk with you again soon.